Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the podcast. This episode of the Marco Martins Revolution is brought to you by Vodcast TV, Johannesburg's premier shared podcast studio platform. If you have seen any episodes of the Marco Martins Revolution before this one, you'll know that all our episodes are brought to you by Vodcast TV. And it's a space where you can create your own podcast. All of our podcasts are recorded here at the Rosebank Mall Vodcast TV studios. And you could have a great podcast just like this one without having to know anything about microphones, cameras, lights, etc. You get your very own sound and video engineer. So all you need to worry about is creating your content. You can get 15% off of your first order with us here at Vodcast TV if you use the link www.vodcasttv.com/revolution. And once again, you'll get 15% off your first order. This episode of The Revolution is a continuation of last week's episode where we chatted football with Elias and Andrea. And we're going to carry on with that now because we're discussing in detail whether we're going to push on and have a permanent football podcast from here. With no further ado, let's get into it.
A revolution is a fundamental and relatively sudden change in political power. An organization which occurs when the population revolts. This is the Marco Martins Revolution, powered by Vodcast TV. Visit vodcasttv.com for more.
Elias Panagiotopoulos, thank you for joining us again with another football podcast. And it's looking more and more likely that this is going to be a permanent thing.
Yeah, thanks for having me again. And you're getting better and better at my surname every week. It's amazing.
It's easy now.
Yeah, it's easy. It's like saying Smith now.
It'll never be like saying Smith. Andrea is late, so we might just keep him locked out or we might let him in. We'll see.
Yeah, depending.
Okay, so let's get back into football. We were talking just before we started, and I said we have to start recording because everything we were saying was so apt and so interesting. We started off talking about Juve because I'm wearing my Juve shirt, and I've been getting a lot of stick for it now that Ronaldo's there. Everyone's like, oh, you only support Juve now because you're Portuguese and Ronaldo's gone there. Yeah. But meanwhile, I've supported Juve for years, and you were also saying you're a big fan of them, and it's from that same sort of era of the late 90s, early 80s.
Yeah, definitely. So I wouldn't say I supported them. I can't say I really supported an Italian team. Like we were saying before the podcast started, we didn't get much games on Super Sports or that. So we only got to see the Champions League generally. So that great era of AC Milan, Juventus rivalry and that one Champions League that ended up being the final. Funny enough, I'd supported AC Milan the whole way. And then the final, I was just like, no, I can't not go for Juve on this one. That team is just ridiculous.
It was such a good side.
And they lost.
For those who don't remember that Juve side, a few names in that Juve side. I think the biggest one, Zinedine Zidane. What a player he was at the time. Pavel Nedved, which we're going to get into more detail on why we love Nedved. Del Piero, great player. David Trezeguet, and Buffon, of course. Yeah. What a side.
Yeah, absolutely. Amazing talent. Just from never mind talking about the spine, the usual spine that goes through a team. It was just, the whole body was amazing, unreal. And it's like a tragedy that they didn't win a Champions League as a team. It's unreal. So yeah, this was a fantastic side.
And then they had all that turmoil then afterwards in a few years after that, the late 2000s, pre-2010, where they were relegated to Serie B for match fixing and all that nonsense.
Yeah, what a pity, man. And then that took them a few years to bounce back, but they bounced back really quickly considering that they went through that turmoil. And they've done amazing. They've had a grip on the league now. Jeez. And they're probably going to win it again.
If the league carries on, if it continues. They're only a couple points ahead of Inter this year. It's the closest the league's been for a while. Because Juve have absolutely dominated. I think it was 7 titles in a row.
Yes,
Something like that, 6 or 7. It's around there.
Yeah.
And, you know, then they buy Cristiano Ronaldo, you think they're going to get to 10 in a row when you're able to pick up a player of his quality.
And I think that would be the difference in that team. So already before the whole coronavirus outbreak, they beat Inter. That was, I think, their last game.
Yes.
So they opened up with either 6 or 7 point lead, which makes Lazio a bit behind them. I just don't know if Lazio have staying power. I don't know. It's maybe unfair to say that, but when you got a guy like Ronaldo, and he's proven it at every team he's been in, he's got the extra points that you need to just, you know, get the title. The 3-4 defining points that you're going to get out of a guy like that. I say 3-4 is probably like 10, 20 points. So it's excellent on their part to have a player like that. Unreal.
Yeah. And just looking at the benches, I think that's one of the big differences between teams winning titles and not winning titles. I think Manchester City have been so successful in the last few years in the English league because the quality of their bench was ridiculous, you know, and even still now, Riyad Mahrez isn't first choice, and he was definitely player of the season in that season with Leicester. And he's just a top-class player. And their whole bench is full of top-class players. And Juve is similar. And Inter seem to have a lot of depth as well, whereas Lazio don't have the same amount of depth. Yes, I think that's big. That's really telling when it comes to a push for a title.
Absolutely, yeah. So, City's, they've had the depth. This season, I think that the depth has weighted quite a bit and it tells in their title push. Especially in the back line. Like Fernandinho is a great player, but let's be honest.
What a player.
Let's be honest. He's not a centre-back.
He's not a centre-back,
and,
but what a player.
He fits in there perfectly. He's great to have in a now-and-then position. But the fact that Laporte went out and that was their centre-back, and now you got Otamendi, who's not
But
great.
even he was out for a few games, and that was a big problem. They had like a major centre-back problem in terms of injuries. I think we can see that from one of the later Alex Ferguson Man United sides was every time that Ferdinand and Vidic were fit for a whole season, we won the title.
Yes.
When either one of them had an injury, we'd lose out on the title. I think that's telling. I mean, look, read into it as you will. There's obviously many other factors that go into it. But it shows you how prominent a factor that is, having a good centre-back partnership that's able to remain throughout.
Yeah, definitely. Like they always say, strikers win you fans and defenders win you trophies. Yeah. It just is what it is, you know. A striker needs one moment, is always something that I felt. A striker needs one moment to change a game. A defender needs to stick to it for the entire 90. So you can do nothing as a striker. Get the ball, turn, shoot. That's all you've done, and you've won.
I think that's why they cost you so much money. Is
exactly.
That if you've got that magical ability to just turn a game over in a minute,
absolutely,
that's essential for a team.
And whereas the defender, he can be brilliant for 90 minutes, and 1 minute of a mistake loses the game. So it's a complete different type of concentration between the defenders and the strikers.
Yeah, it's true. Speaking of a moment of magic for a striker, we were talking about that Juve side from the late 90s. And in the year 2000, David Trezeguet, I think he signed for Juve just before those Euro Championships.
Yes.
And then his goal put Italy out of the league, and he was hated on his way into Italy.
Man.
And we were discussing that silver goal rule. If you remember, that was something that came in. And I stand to be corrected. I think that Trezeguet goal was a silver goal. Where during that period where FIFA came up with this, or it was UEFA maybe at the time, who had this idea of having the silver goal, where in extra time, the first half of extra time, if you're ahead in that first half of extra time, they call it there instead of playing the full 30 minutes of extra time.
Yeah, that's right. I remember that game quite clearly. I was sitting in Greece. I've always been a massive France supporter. It's got nothing to do with Zinedine Zidane. It's actually got to do with my mom. She picked France, and then I picked France because she picked France. So that's anyway. So
it's funny how moms do that. It's like that's why I'm a Man United fan.
Exactly.
I mean, my mom was a Man United fan from when she was young, just because of Gary Bailey. You know, she wanted to support a South African, and Gary Bailey was a South African guy playing at Man United.
Yes.
And then sort of, you know, she was young, so it didn't really stick that well. But then when she saw Ryan Giggs in the Man United, she thought, wow, that's an incredible player. Just that silky, swift, sharp movement that he had.
Yeah.
And then I'm a Man United fan. You know, I inherited it.
Yeah, you inherit. I'm the same. I inherited from my mom. guess a lot of guys would inherit from their dad rather.
Yeah.
But I don't know. My mom has always been quite into football. Yeah, so going back to the France story, I was sitting in Greece. I was the only one besides my mom that was supporting France. Everyone was supporting Italy, and I was devastated. You know how it is to be a young football fan.
Yeah, horrible.
It's the final, and you are devastated. And I remember it's 1-0, and that's it. Finished. Italy's won, and here comes Waltord. We're discussing, you can't remember who scored the winner.
What the order was
but it was Waltord and Trezeguet. One of them scored the equalizer and one of them scored the winner.
Yeah.
And
I think it was Waltord with the equalizer and Trezeguet with the winner.
That's how I also think it is. It sounds right. Because Trezeguet got more of the stick. Yeah. The poor guy was hated before he even joined his club.
Yeah, shame.
He's going to Juve as a striker proven to win trophies and they hate him. But
I think he won them over.
Yeah, definitely. He definitely won them over. But I did read a bit about him before and he went through quite a bit of stick because, you know, the ultras in Italy are very heavy.
They're intense.
They are very intense and they have like a voice, almost like a political voice. You know, the English stand to be corrected again. They're more like hooligan style. Whereas with the ultras are more like organized unit, political movements. They have a voice. They say what they want. Like they talk on the radios. They're quite big, especially in Italy. Yeah. So it's tough. I know Ibrahimovic also spoke in his book about that. He had a tough time with the Inter ultras because he went from Inter
to AC Milan.
So he had a tough time with those guys. And I don't know if he said it was because of them, but his wife was involved in a attempted, kidnapping.
Kidnapping.
And he reckons it was related.
It was related, yeah.
But yeah, she fought back, funnily enough. He taught her, you know, he's what does he do? Karate or some
sort of martial arts, yeah.
But anyway, back to the Juve side and Trezeguet. It must have been tough going into an Italian team.
Yeah.
As the one who put them down, you know, not an easy feat to go to Juventus, arguably the biggest club in Italy.
It's a difficult argument, but definitely
AC
now.
Milan, Juve, well, in recent times it's definitely Juve.
I think because in recent times, whether they weren't the biggest a few years ago, because they probably weren't. So like historically, the biggest AC Milan was up there, Inter, Juve. So there's quite a few big clubs, Roma. And maybe not as big as the other three I mentioned, but like certainly a big club.
Yes.
And then in the last few years, in terms of international interest getting into the Italian game, where they've always had like a fair amount of international interest, especially with the superstar players over the years, you know. Napoli having Diego Maradona for as long as they did. Zinedine Zidane at Juve, the Ronaldo at Inter. You know, so they've had great players, so there was always international interest in them. But international interest in football has grown in recent years, especially moving out to the Far East there. And I think because of Juve's success in recent years, they certainly now the most supported internationally.
Yeah, definitely. The old lady.
Yeah, the old lady. So going back to that silver goal rules, another thing we were discussing before we started recording is how the governing bodies are always trying to come up with these new regulations to make football fair for both teams. I think that's one of the elements they're looking to do. I think also in a tournament format, you play so many minutes in a short period of time. They're trying to make a fair way for a team to win a game, but also try not to have the players play too many minutes. I mean, I think you find so many managers in the England in particular moaning about the FA Cup replays. To have a replay in the FA Cup, you'd rather lose it almost. So many managers, rather than going and playing another whole fixture, because the league is so important, you'd rather actually lose an FA Cup knockout game than have to go through and play a repeat, you know, to play a rescheduled fixture.
Definitely, man. And also, you must remember, it's a psychological thing as much as a physical thing. So if the silver goal comes in and you spending 15 minutes per half in extra time, that's less 15 minutes. Okay, the losing team feels like if I had 15 minutes,
we could have fought back.
But okay, so that's and again, fairness is subjective, right?
Yes.
You can never be fair. You can be as fair as you think you can be based on certain requirements.
Yeah,
so
but I think
maybe it's player welfare and balancing it like that to say, you know, the physical part of it keep the guys in fresher, so the next game is of more like a higher quality than them having a week or a few days break. Obviously, the longer you go into the tournament, the longer the break is. And then also mentally, going through all of that mentally, coming out either as the winner or loser will drain you more the longer you go into it. So the winners will come out, and we see, for example, and I know it's not anything to do with soccer. It's actually rugby or football. Sorry. It's the Springboks when they played England.
Yeah.
England had put everything into that semi-final to beat the All Blacks. They were mentally drained, completely drained, come into the game against the Springboks, and they just didn't pitch. And we've seen that happen in football. Guys just mentally don't pitch for the next game. So maybe it was an attempt to say, okay, let's keep the guys more mentally refreshed, physically refreshed. But it does take away that if you've been a United fan your whole life, and recently, I guess, a Liverpool fan, that last minute, not give up goal can be the last second of the game, and you need 2 goals and you'll get it. And that's football.
That's football.
So unfortunately, the silver goal, I think, took away that, you as a fan know there could have been 15 minutes in this. Who knows what would have happened? Obviously, as a winning side, I was telling you earlier, the Greeks won against the Czech Republic with a silver goal. Typical corner header. And I couldn't be happier that the game ended there and then.
Yeah, because you wanted it to end. Yeah, of course.
But still, like on a general note, it's football's not watched by the two fans. It's watched by everyone.
Yes.
So it's about the collective good rather than just about the fans or the specific team.
I think it's also important for the governing bodies to be trying things. To
absolutely.
Try and make things better. So you can discuss the pros and the cons of everything. Like goal line technology has been a huge success, VAR hasn't. But they need to try all of these things and utilize technology. That's one of the big discussions on this now.
Yes.
But I think the silver goal came into play originally because the golden goal seemed so unfair.
Yes.
So they had golden goal rules. Okay, this isn't working, that someone just scores in this extra time. You play until you score sort of thing. And then obviously that wasn't very well liked. It seemed a bit unfair. But it was a good way to at least end a match because, you've ended level. How do you now pick a winner fairly?
Yes.
So then get rid of golden goal, then you introduce silver goal, and then that sort of seemed to be unliked as well.
Yeah.
So now they just sort of go the whole 30 minutes of extra time in penalties, which is strenuous on the players, I think. But at the end of the day, I think it works. Let's start experimenting elsewhere. I don't know if that's going to work. Yeah,
you've ticked the box, and now everyone knows that golden goal and silver goal don't work. I guess the biggest problem for me with golden goal was that teams went into extra time risk averse. So rather than going, all right, let's go get it, they would be like, whoa, if we concede, we're out. So everyone 11
you fear
in the
the
box.
counter attack so badly.
So it's like we're not pushing anyone, maybe one striker, long ball. So then the game kind of loses its edge.
Yeah.
Whereas with extra time as it is, you can score, you still will be a little bit more risk averse, but you might go for it. What was this last game that was just played? Atletico Madrid with Liverpool.
Right.
It was quite 3 goals in extra time. That's a lot of goals.
I think at
minutes.
this stage in a season as well is tired legs.
Yeah.
You've got tired legs, tired minds. You've played so many games. After the busy Christmas period and things like that for the English teams, and you buggered. I think Liverpool were buggered. I think they've played a really tough league season. They've done really well, and then they go into a game like that, extra time, concede a few, get quite unhappy. The tale of 2 goalkeepers as well, where Oblak was exceptional, and Liverpool don't seem to have a second goalkeeper. Anyway, so we spoke about Trezeguet and Juve. I think an even more important player for that Juve side, and one of the most shockingly amazing players who's perhaps underrated and not spoken about enough, Pavel Nedved.
Jeez, unreal player, that guy. It's like the Scholes of the Italian league.
Yeah, he was unbelievable. I think technically exceptional. I've never seen a player who's so two-footed that they decide which foot they're going to take a free kick with based on the position of the free kick on the pitch.
Yeah.
So if the free kick was on the left-hand side of the box, he would strike it with his right foot. If it was on the right-hand side of the box, he'd strike with his left foot, and that's how ambidextrous he was. He could use either foot equally. And he was often asked by the Italian press and media, which is your preferred foot? And it was literally the answer was always neither. He literally didn't have a preferred foot, which is incredible. I'm so right-footed. My left foot is a joke.
Yeah, so I can use both of my feet quite well. I'm right-footed, obviously. But what makes it another level is those players who can use dead ball situations with 2 feet. That's another story altogether.
Yeah.
Like, put under pressure, you can hit across with your left foot. You can pass with your left. You can strike with your left. A lot of that is like instinctual. It happens. You've got a split second to make a decision and you just do it.
Yes.
But when you put the ball down, you step a few paces back, you look, I kind of got to put the ball there, or I'm going to shoot over there. And now you're looking at your left foot and you're thinking, how am I going to do this? Because with your right foot, you don't have that thought process. You just think of the end result. Your right foot sort of, where more or less where you're going to hit it. Sure. But with your left foot, it feels a bit like you're holding a golf club backwards. Yeah. And you're going to now try and chip this ball into the box. That is exceptional, to hit dead ball situations with both feet.
And I don't think I've ever seen a player like him since, in those terms, in terms of being that two-footed. Yeah. I think I see Marcus Rashford as one of the players who you see him play. He strikes the ball quite well with his left, but he's clearly right-footed.
Yes.
And I think it's normal for a footballer. You can't really criticize them for having a preferred foot.
Yes.
But you can criticize them for having a really poor weak foot.
Yeah. Definitely.
So I think that's the thing, is that if you have a really poor weak foot, work on it and improve it, because that's something you can do. The more you use your weak foot in training and things, you're going to improve your weak foot.
Yeah.
But to get to that level of having both feet equally good is really difficult. And we were discussing again before we started, Mason Greenwood is someone that other players in training are mentioning as being a player who strikes free kicks with either foot.
Yeah, so I was reading a bit about on Man United News. I can't remember which platform it was, but they were saying one of the defenders said that he's exceptional. I mean, what is he? 7? How old is he again?
I think he's 18 now.
18.
I think he turned 18 this year or something.
And he seems to be a left footer from what I can see.
Sure.
And he's really good with both feet. They say that he does take dead ball situation, free kicks, corners, and all of that with both feet. But and I just picked up on this. What's exceptional is that generally left-footers are very left-footed. Right. Their right foot is a lot weaker than our left foot. It's just how it is in most sports. The left-hander, the left-footer, whatever, it's very predominantly on the left because he's a bit different.
And my logic to that is it comes from a coaching thing at youth. I remember when I was young, if we had a left-footed player in our squad, he always had a game. He was first pick.
Left wing.
Every time. Yeah. Every single time. If you had a naturally left-footed player, he wasn't under threat for his position. Yes, no one would replace him. Even if he wasn't as good, because his left foot was so heavily valued by the coaches at youth level. The left foot was so heavily valued that you continue to work on your left foot more than the right, and coaches sort of motivated right-footed players, because it's more common, motivated the right-footed players to use their left more. I think it was just so heavily valued at my youth level, at least, that I think this is probably something that impairs naturally left-footed players' ability to use both feet.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I actually never thought of it like that. But definitely, now that you mention it, it's just all the left-footed players I've ever known stuck on the left, either left back or left wing. And if it's in the midfield, it's the left centre mid. I mean, they've got that little corner out. It makes sense. I mean, even if I can cross with my left foot, the quality is obviously not as good as a left footer. So yeah, and it definitely makes sense. And then, with Greenwood being that left footer,
yes,
and having a right foot as well that can take free kicks. I mean, Giggs is one of the great left wingers of international football. Amazing.
Poor
right foot. Compare his right foot to my left foot. I don't want to.
Yeah. Listen, he's right.
Maybe.
Listen, Ryan Giggs' right foot is better than my right foot, and I'm right-footed.
Yeah.
And he's got a really poor right foot.
Yeah.
So my left foot compared to him at all is not even worth mentioning.
But on that stage, his right foot has always been a little bit weak.
On that level, he's got a poor right foot.
You can't say anything about his game.
No.
You're not criticizing the way he played.
No.
Just the fact that he
Just
can get
making an
away with
analysis.
it with a really strong left foot.
Yeah.
You can have a really strong right foot, and you won't be good enough. And I've seen that in a lot of players. It's just so easy to mark.
Yeah.
Put him on the right. You know he's going to go on the right. It's just how it is. When I played, luckily I had good striking feet, both sides. Just by being able to use both my feet, I've already got the defender guessing.
Yes.
I'm looking to see which foot I can strike with. Obviously if I can get it on my right, I'll do it. Yeah. But it doesn't matter to me. I'll take it on my left as much as I would on my right, to be honest.
It gives you the opportunity to decide in the moment what's going to be the most suitable thing. Should I cut back now? Should I just play it early? Yeah. What should I do? You know? Yeah. And whereas for me, if I were to think, should I cut back now? I've already got myself second guessing if I'm going to do it because of the weak left foot, you know, because you lack the confidence with your weak foot.
Yes.
So it already limits my options as a right-sided player.
And it also makes my options as a defender easier because I know I'm going to give it my all on your right. And should you cut back on your left, it's okay because you're going to shoot with your left or whatever with your left foot and it's probably going to be ineffective. But if I know that you got two good feet, I'm going to be stuck. I don't know which way to go. If I give too much on the right and you go on the left, or if I do the other way around, I'm stuck as a defender. So it's just that psychological game that you play with the strikers, with the defenders, as to what your capabilities are.
I think that's really something worth looking at now, and just the discussion of Mason Greenwood having been so young in an academy like the Man United Academy, where he started at a very young age. I think you've got any former top professionals who are training young kids who are 11, 12, 13. And it's really, really top professionals, people who played at the highest level of the game are training these kids. So I think it gives them the benefit and they get inspired by those coaches, or at least pushed towards developing both feet, things like that, and how important those skills are. Speaking tactically about the left-sided player and the right-sided player, I kind of like where you have a look at the Manchester City side, for example. They're quite a good example of sticking the right-footed player on the left wing and the left-footed player on the right wing. When you see Raheem Sterling and Riyad Mahrez playing in the same side, Mahrez a predominantly left-footed player, Sterling a predominantly right-footed player, and they're on the opposite flanks. And this gives you a great opportunity to cut in and hit a shot in for the far corner.
Yeah, it's just it's a great tactic. We actually used to use it quite a bit ourselves. It just messes with everything that's stuck in a rhythm is difficult to break. So you're going down the wing, you're crossing. It's a little bit of our conversation last week when you get down the wing and you have to cross it, otherwise you're going to get shot.
Yeah.
Anyway, if you flip the guys over, all of a sudden, the guy who's been playing 30 minutes with someone getting to the byline and crossing the ball now has got to deal with the guy cutting in behind him.
Yeah.
It also allows for the overlap on the defender. So if he cuts in, doesn't get success, he can play it on the right or on the left, whatever side we're talking about, and get the ball in. So it creates a bit more of an option and breaks the routine of, I know what kind of defense I'm up against.
And obviously now you're describing it as having been a change during a game.
Yes.
So say you're 30 minutes in, it's not been working for you, that defender's got you worked out.
Yes.
Give that defender a new challenge by swapping flanks.
Correct.
And then each of those defenders have to either swap flanks back to the player they were defending or adjust their game to now deal with a different sided player.
Correct. And you don't often see, and I can't recall too many times where the defenders actually change, because
it's very difficult.
Because also remember, when the defenders get the ball, they have been trained on how to get the ball forward with the people like around them. So say it's Wan-Bissaka, he's not used to maybe playing with Greenwood who's on the left.
Yeah.
He's playing with these guys. And I really am quite into that whole thinking that unit of, you got your unit that you play with. Obviously, you got to learn everyone else around you. But, the Scholes and Fletcher and Scholes and Carrick, those guys must know everything about each other, what foot, how they look when they pass, when they breathe. It just makes it easier to play with someone like that.
The relationship is so important.
Whereas with the winger, he's going to get the ball and he's going for goal. And your movement is somewhat the same in the box. You may be just facing a different way or something like that. But you're not really playing the ball out, getting into space. The winger's going to try shoot, cross, something like that.
Yeah.
Get into those positions.
I think another element of that is that in terms of naturally talented and skillful players, are normally deployed as your wingers, and your wingbacks or fullbacks are more defensively minded or more capable in other areas. And they don't necessarily have that ability to cut back onto the weaker foot or anything. So you sort of want to keep your right-footed player playing at right back and your left-footed player playing at left back as best you can, so that when they make the overlapping run for the winger who has cut back, then they can strike it quickly on the strong foot to cross it into the box. So I think in the ideal situation, that's why you see it deployed that way so often. You have the right-footed player on the right fullback or right wing-back position, and a left-sided player on the left fullback or left wing-back position. Obviously, there's exceptions to this throughout history. Dennis Irwin, as a Man United legend, right-footed player playing at left fullback. Now the youngster Brand Williams. A lot of players, a lot of fans, I see them commenting on the Facebook groups and whatever, and it's like, yeah, but he's a left back. And you say, yeah, but he's right-footed, by the way, guys. You know, it's like, I know he's been deployed at left back since he's come into the first side, but he's a right-footed player. So, you know, that's it's something that can happen, and it just shows the importance of being able to use both feet.
Yeah, definitely. Using both feet is key in the game. And you know, we were talking about it a little bit before on developmental level.
Yes.
You know, I remember my coaches saying, use your left foot. And my greatest teachers in my life were actually my parents. They showed me how to use my left foot. But I remember coaches saying, use your left foot more, pass a little bit more. But I don't know if there was enough to get you to develop your left foot as well. I mean, there's two areas. It's your alternative foot, so obviously left foot is on the right, and headers. Those are the two very badly taught skills in our upbringing.
Yes.
That put us a bit on the back foot, and you see it ripple through to the national side, right? There's been times when we've tried a defensive strategy with Bafana and that, and the minute a team, and I remember the one African, not the Champions League, the
African Cup of
Nations. We were in winning positions in all three games. And we lost because the other team got the ascendancy and started crossing the ball into the box. And our headers are weak. You can just see it across the board. Maybe now it's a little bit different, but the headers, the defensive headers, the striking headers, I'm not saying you don't header well at all. You know, sometimes you'll get the luck of the draw and you connect well. But it's just the frequency of doing it well more often is quite low.
And then keeping that defensive shape when you have managed to deploy a successful or rather send back a successful an attack successfully, rather. I'm losing my words, it seems. But if a cross comes in and you're able to header it away successfully, it's about once you've managed to get the ball out, you're likely to lose the possession again. You've just made a clearance. You've not made a pass out into midfield, things like that. Hopefully one of your midfielders wins the second ball or the turnover. But it's unlikely because their players are positioned better to receive the possession again. So once they've received possession, it's about setting up that defensive shape again, because it's easy on the first phase to keep your defensive shape, a lot easier. But once it reaches a second phase or a re-attack after that successful clearance, that's very difficult to deploy that defensive shape again. And that's where you become very vulnerable. And it seems like you say, the Bafana side has been vulnerable to that because they're not comfortable with that sort of strategic way. You know, Bafana is a bit like one of the Brazilian sides of old, whereas if you try to make them play a way they weren't comfortable in, I remember before Pele, the Brazilian side tried to deploy the successful football of the time, the Italian football, where it was very strategic, very tactical, and defensive. Whereas the Brazilian players, the great players of the time, weren't comfortable playing that way. You know, so they were more comfortable with this Brazilian dancing style of football, you know, the magical feet and the magical quick passing and things like that. That sort of beautiful football that made the whole world fall in love with the Brazil side. As soon as they played in a way that they weren't comfortable, it made them vulnerable. And perhaps that's something that's happening with the Bafana side. Very similar to the Brazilians, the players are more comfortable playing skillful football as opposed to the tactical, stringent football.
Yeah.
But once again, I think it's about deploying balance into sides. You know, if you can have a set of stringent, difficult to beat tactical players and sprinkle in a little bit of that magic talent, I think that creates a successful football side.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, you actually touched on this last week, which is important. When Mourinho came out into the world, he brought that element of professionalism, almost like a military kind of thinking. You're going in this with your enemy, you must know everything and anything about them. So where the flair in that came into play was where there wasn't that much structure. Okay, guys I'm not saying they didn't have structure.
Yeah.
But let's be honest, the structures today, as opposed to 10 years, let alone 20, 30 years ago, there were more gaps. Now you'll see coaches are so, players are so drilled that they know where to stand, how to stand.
Yeah.
I mean, even in our youth academies, we're already being taught, sometimes we'd do man marking, sometimes we'd split the players, you know, stand in between them. So if the play is going this way, then you move like this, and you move like that, and you make it really difficult for the guys to get out. So you have to have both sides, like you were saying. A little bit of skill, but if you don't have a defensive structure in today's time, then you're kind of on the back foot. Defensive structure is the backbone of the team. And you could see that with Liverpool. They're the prime example of that. They played the most beautiful football for the last 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
Sometimes it was a terrible capitulation because they might have been 3-0 up, the Palace game. That probably cost them that title.
Yeah. One of the two, I think, is that game and the Chelsea game. Mm-hmm.
And then you think of the Liverpool today, where I wouldn't say they're playing the greatest football, to be honest.
A lot of 1-0s.
Yeah. But if you, as United fans, you know that when we won trophies, we were also winning 1-0, 1-0, 2-1, not really playing well, sweating to the last minute. And that's just how you win trophies. But it's good to have that instilled in you when you need to switch it on for 5 minutes. And that's what they can do. 5 minutes of flair, goal. All right, we're back in the game. Or we're winning the game again.
I think the key point that you've made there is defensive backbone, or to be defensively rigid. And I think the ideal situation for a coach and how you want to get your team to play is that you want to be predictable defensively and unpredictable in attack. And I think that's your ideal situation, is that the more unpredictable you are in attack, the more likely you are to create problems for the opposing team. The more predictable you are in defense, the last thing you want is an unpredictable defense. You want to be stringent and predictable in defense and unpredictable in attack. I think that the British commentary tends to say this well as well in your second point, is that the 1-0s, you know, just sort of getting through a game. And you'll often hear a British commentator talk about the champions elect coming up when they've won a game they didn't deserve to win. When you see like you're getting battered by Newcastle, but you somehow come out with a 1-0 because the keeper, because of some luck, because it hits the post, because of a referee's decision. That's the mark of champion, is if you still get points even when you've played badly. If you play badly and still get points, then you're going to be champions, because when you play well, you're going to get the points.
Yeah, absolutely. That is the defining characteristic. Those are the points that win you the league. United has been great at it. City has been great at it. Chelsea in their day was great at it. Arsenal, the Invincibles, they got so many draws that time when they were Invincibles. I saw it the other day, it was something like 12 draws. But those draws, the one I remember distinctly was the Southampton game. And they were actually being bossed by Southampton. And Robert Van Persie on the edge of the box. On the edge of the box, he was like on the side, on the edge of the box.
Yeah.
And he scored an absolute screamer, brought it back. And that's just those games, a psychological boost. There's so many things behind getting those goals at the end of a game. You just don't feel like you can lose. I've been in those teams in youth level, obviously, where you just, doesn't matter what the score is, you almost feel like you don't care, because you know somehow you're going to find a way. And it's very important to keep that rolling. And at the moment, Liverpool's the only team in the league, I feel, that's got that. The other guys have just been too up and down. And yeah, it's definitely the difference between getting those 2-3 points that win you the league, or lose you the league if you or get you relegated.
Yeah,
you know, you get those super runs at the end of the season where you get a Sam Allardyce in or someone like that. And he just pulls together 10 unbeaten game run, and you're out.
5 clean sheets, and it saves your season. And you looked like you were destined for the championship, and you somehow survive. Whether you're Tony Pulis or Sam Allardyce, it seems to be their strategy. You know, is let us be solid at the back, and that's how you survive. I think you look at Norwich at the moment. I think that's a huge mark of showing you what not to do in terms of staying in the Premier League. If you've just come up, Norwich have been great fun. They look a better side than a lot of the sides around them because they score a lot of goals. But they're sitting rock bottom. They're not going to survive if the league does manage to continue in some way, because defensively they're not sound enough. And they can score all the goals they like. They're going to go down. When you're one of the weaker sides, if you can't defend, you're going to go down. And I think that's a key point. Is Norwich look a better side, like I said, than most of those sides. You look at the beginning of the season, Pookie couldn't stop scoring goals. And they're sitting stone last, and they're really off the back of a run of bad results. And I think it's key. I think it's a good sign of why you would want to bring in a Sam Allardyce or a Tony Pulis, or even David Moyes is brought in as a survival technician for West Ham, you know. And they all sort of go about those same key factors. Is let's be solid at the back. Let's shut up shop a little bit and see if we can sprinkle a couple goals in there and just be dogged and just drag out results. And it seems to be the same sort of philosophy whether you're at the top or at the bottom. Is if you can be dogged and just get a result out of nowhere, it can mean survival and can mean championships.
Yeah, definitely. And one of the teams that battled with that transition, they actually got it right eventually. The famous yo-yo side of West Brom, up and down, up and down, up and down, known for playing very good football, like that beautiful passes, had a lot of possession for a team in the bottom half, if not the bottom half of the bottom half, the last quarter of the league, but just wouldn't win games, would lose control of a game easily, and it just fell apart. And if I remember the name correctly, was it Steve Clark?
Yes.
He came in. And
former Chelsea
under Mourinho, kept a little bit of that flair. He had Lukaku as his striker, good striker, and he had a bit of rigidity at the back. And they kept, you could see when they did go down, it was just a terrible coach that took over at West Brom, because that team shouldn't have gone down.
They wanted to evolve the game, because it's like you get stuck. I think you get Bournemouth's a bit in that position right now.
Yes,
they're a team that survived a few seasons. Look, they're never going to look to change their manager. Eddie Howe's a great manager and a legend for the club. But once you've been there for a while, you can get into a rut where you don't have that determination to survive that you have early on, or that grit and that edge that you have in your first couple seasons in top flight football. And then it tapers off a little bit, and then you start concentrating like, okay, we've been here a while. How do we push on to the next step? And that's almost a very dangerous decision for clubs. You've seen clubs make that decision. It's like, okay, we want to push on now, because you also don't want to stay that survival team anymore. You've been here, you're starting to establish yourself as a Premier League side. You've developed a little bit of income. You can buy certain types of players that you didn't have access to before. So let's try and become a top 10 side instead of a survival side. And then maybe start pushing for Europe, something along those lines, so once you've established yourself. But it's a very dangerous decision, because a lot of the time that has to come with a change of manager. You don't want a survival manager anymore. I don't think Sam Allardyce is the sort of guy you're going for, although he was a manager of the England side, short-lived.
Yeah.
But like Man United aren't going to be knocking on Sam Allardyce's door and say, come win us trophies. Whether he's a victim of his own success, that he's been pigeonholed as a survival manager, along with others like Tony Pulis, and maybe David Moyes will be categorized there now as well. It's a very difficult decision for a club to make, because you sort of do want to do that, especially clubs that have new owners. You look at Wolves, for example, where you want to develop something more. You've got access to the funds. You want to do more than just be in the Prem. You want to be established, and you want to be pushing higher and higher and higher, and growing the team into a more entertaining team, things like that. And Fulham fell victim to that. In the Prem for so many seasons, top flight football. They bring in, oh man, his name eludes me now. Anyway, bring in a manager.
Was it Coleman?
Felix.
Coleman.
It was a German manager. I can't remember. Anyway.
I know you're talking about.
Yeah, he came in and he wanted to play football. Lots of passing, lots of possession, pretty football. And it just started going all wrong for them. And they had a pretty good side. They were well established for such a long time. And now it's sort of, they're tinkering on promotion. And then, when they come back in, they're going to be tinkering on relegation again. It's going to be very difficult for them. And I think it's a difficult decision to be made with the owner of the club who loves Fulham. He's done wonderful things for them in a way, but he's also taken away that doggedness that they had.
Yeah, so Fulham actually made Europa League during the stage, the final. Was it the final, the semi-final? No, it was the final. They lost out in the final, and then a few seasons later, they down and out. And it also brings to mind one of the other clubs that was a middle-of-the-table club, would go and get a win against a United or someone. It was Charlton. Charlton Athletic were in the Premier League for a long time.
With Balletet.
Yeah, with Balletet and all the great
for those of
Mark
you
Fish.
For those of you who don't get the reference of Balletet, listen to the previous episode and you'll get the reference.
Yeah, that was a funny one. Sean Balletet.
Balletet.
And it was Mark Fish at the same time. So it was two South Africans in that squad. And they did well. They would always be 10th. And I think that was the thing. It's like, okay, we're topping the bottom table. We're better than, a lot of the teams, but we need to kick on. And then they fired Alan Kirbishley and they brought in Alan Pardew.
Yes.
In fact, they switched clubs.
Because Kirbishley went to...
was it Palace? No, it wasn't Palace then.
Was it West Ham?
Yeah, it was West Ham.
Yeah.
And then Charlton I think they did okay for a little bit. They went down and that's it. They've been nowhere near to promotion since.
No.
So it just shows you that it's very dangerous. And you got to be careful because let's say if a billionaire comes in, like Wolves is in this precarious situation right now. They've got a great opportunity. They might get a Champions League spot if the league continues, or even if next season continues. They might even win the Europa League and get into Champions League.
Yes.
But the bottom line is their name is Wolves. It's not Man United. It's not Arsenal. It's not Chelsea. It's not Real Madrid, and it's not Barcelona. You're going to keep a player. You can pay them a lot of money, but money's not that for everyone. The players grow up dreaming about playing for a big club.
But
and
wouldn't you say Manchester City have done this successfully?
Yeah, no,
because I don't think there's a player in that Manchester City squad that was 8 years old with big eyes watching on TV and wanting to wear that badge and running around pointing a name on the back of the shirt that said Kaladzi.
It's a great point.
Kaladzi was a great player and he's a City legend and everything. But there weren't kids in South America running around with a Kaladzi shirt.
Yeah.
They might have been running around with a shirt for Mark Hughes. Something like that, a Man United shirt. Or,
yes.
Or even a Liverpool shirt from whether it be John Barnes or someone like that for those great sides. Yeah. But Manchester City now will have kids watching today. And it's just because money came in.
Yeah,
There's no other reason. And you'll have kids wearing Aguero shirts all around the planet.
Yeah, so it's not impossible. It's possible. And remember when City did it, they weren't challenged by many other clubs doing it. It was City and maybe, I don't know. Who else was it at the time?
Chelsea, definitely.
But Chelsea already is an established name. But one of the lower teams, unrecognized. Villa was somewhere in there, and they didn't.
Villa's a big side,
and they didn't push to go. Yeah. Remember, it was City and Villa that were vying for position.
Villa's a very big football side.
Yes,
I mean, and Villa's got
if they got
huge
money,
history.
Exactly. So if they got money, maybe it's a different story. But I mean, now you've got what was a top 4 is like a top 6.
Yeah.
And then you've got Wolves who are vying for a position. You've got Leicester who are vying for a position. You've got Everton now with money. So now we've already on 9 teams.
Yeah.
And there's only 4 Champions League spots. Maybe you can count 5 if you say Europa League winners.
And listen, Newcastle might be on the next on the list there.
I don't know.
Newcastle's a big club name. Newcastle's a club with history.
Honestly, that is so disappointing. That shirt you're wearing could just as well be a Newcastle shirt with a Ronaldo on the back. Honestly,
it really could.
It could be. They've got one of the biggest following fan base.
They're a one-club town.
Yeah.
I mean, I know Sunderland's down the road.
Yeah.
But it's down the road.
Yeah.
They're a one-club town.
Yes.
They really are. And listen, those Geordies breathe football.
Yeah.
It's not like the rest of England where people are big football fans. But you go to Newcastle and that club is everything. The town shuts down on game day.
Yeah, and it's a big stadium, big following. They had great players. They've got a heritage, a history. Their players remind me a little bit of the Liverpool fans, how crazy they go. And, the cop is very similar to the fans at Newcastle. So I don't understand why that club is not just kicked on.
I'll explain to you why. Mike Ashley.
It's
Mike Ashley.
Mike Ashley has been, I'd rather not say the word I was going to use, but he's been detrimental to that squad.
He's been there a long time, and they're in the Premier League, and he did bring in Rafa Benitez, but there's only so much a manager like him can do there. And I think that there's been lots of talk and lots of people interested in buying that football club. Very often, he's a businessman. He wants to make top dollar for a club that's just not worth it. But who knows? Maybe Floyd Mayweather is going to step in and buy it like he says he might. He's been posting on social media that he wants to buy Newcastle. I don't see that happening because, it didn't even go through to the conglomerate that's been working on it for 3 or 4 years. And that's a conglomerate of businessmen, although Floyd Mayweather does have loads of money and he might be silly enough to buy a football club. If Mike Tyson's going to buy a Tiger, maybe Floyd Mayweather will buy Newcastle.
Yeah, that's a good point. And let's say he does, and let's say money comes into Newcastle. We've now got a 10th team. So now we've got 10 teams with money vying for position. What's the differentiating factor that's going to make you the one that attracts the top stars?
Only history.
Yeah, history, and it's both. I would say it's history, long term, and current. Like that's why United's in a very dangerous position, and they need to crack on in a way, get some Champions League regular football, because every season is just going to get a little bit more difficult. That's and a little bit more difficult.
Ask Liverpool.
Yeah, they were stuck for a while. Liverpool finishing 8th. Luckily for them, it was the big 4.
Yeah.
That big 6, big 7, 8, whatever you want to call the upcoming guys.
But ask Liverpool how difficult it's been to attract players over the past 30 years.
Yeah.
Compared to how easy it would have been if they continued to win titles or continued to push for titles like they did before. But because they hadn't won a trophy for so many years, or at least a league title, made it far more difficult for them to sign a player.
Yeah, and luckily for them, they have a one-of-a-kind heritage. United is one of those. United and Liverpool are the 2 biggest clubs in England, without a doubt. So we've got that kind of heritage that pushes us through, almost like that feeling, are they going to somehow get it together and be again in the top 4, winning trophies and that. You've always got that kind of feeling. But like we were saying, that the recent history is very important to keep that going. Because as much as the past can dictate how great you are, if you don't have the recent history, you're going to have problems. And I think that the biggest danger to Arsenal, in fact, is that I was just going to bring them up of the big 6, in my opinion.
I think they're the 3rd biggest club in England. They're behind United, Liverpool. I think United's substantially ahead. They're just one of the most supported clubs in world football. Then Liverpool, just from their history, they're historically well supported. And I think they're sort of neck and neck with Arsenal until now. Now that they're more successful, I think they've really pushed ahead again. Yeah. But I think Arsenal have huge fan base in Africa, throughout Africa. And then you look at Chelsea, who I think may be a bigger club internationally than Arsenal now, because of all that success under Mourinho, made them hugely popular around the world.
Yeah, and also you remember that the Chelsea of the 2000s is the most successful team in England. They won more titles consistently than any other club. So they had that going for them as well. Arsenal is in a very dangerous position. I don't know if Arteta's the right guy. I'm not saying he's not. I just haven't made up my mind yet about what his capabilities are. It's going to be really tough. I feel like that team has lost its spine a bit, has lost its edge. And in fact, one of the guys I was talking to is my cousin who gave me a bit of feedback on our previous podcast. He said to me, think about this question. How many great captains can you remember? Not captains, those nuggety guys that were leaders in a team. And how many can you think, like a Roy Keane, a Patrick Vieira, can you name them now that are in the current teams today? And when you think of that question and you go to Arsenal, and you can already think of Patrick Vieira,
Yeah.
Adams, Bold, those guys were tough as nails. They were strong characters in and out of the change room, and they had like this presence. And if I ask you which players like that in Arsenal, you'd probably say Xhaka is probably one.
Yeah, who's a loose cannon.
It's a loose cannon, is a bit different.
But he is that.
Yes.
I have a
But
lot of
hated by
respect
the
for
fans.
Xhaka for a short time.
Yeah.
That time where the fans had a go at him and he had a go at them while he was walking off the pitch, while he was being subbed. I thought he was finished.
Yes.
I thought this guy's never going to play in that shirt ever again. And he's come back and he's given his all and everything. I've got a lot of respect for that man because of that. And I think the fans overall have welcomed him back. So I think when I first heard of the Xhaka signing, because I followed him just press-wise and some stats, and I watched a couple highlight reels of his and things like that when Arsenal were talking about picking him up. So not that I followed Bundesliga closely, that I knew every player and how they were doing. But when they were signing Xhaka, I thought, wow, Arsenal's going to be a force now, because that's what they needed. They had a lot of pretty footballers, but they didn't have any of that grit. You know, Patrice Evra said it recently in one of his TV spells, you know, one of his TV interviews. And he was saying he used to call Arsenal his babies. He used to say, oh, they're my babies, because they weren't aggressive enough. They weren't determined or dogged or anything. So they played pretty football and they could pass the ball all day long and things like that. But they weren't gritty, dogged. They couldn't do any of that. And I think that's apt for Arsenal, because I think in terms of good football, they're up there. I mean, City at the moment probably a step ahead. But other than that, there isn't a team that plays better football than Arsenal. And there hasn't been for years. Even under Wenger, it's gotten worse since Emre. But I think Arteta's a top acquisition for them. I think I would have gone for Ancelotti just out of being safe. But Arteta is a very good decision.
Yeah, so I guess also from a cultural perspective, he knows the club, and it's still yet to be proven if that's a successful strategy. This player who knows the history, knows the club. I don't know. I haven't bought into it yet. I'm hoping that it works with Solskjaer, that he's the guy that proves that works. Zidane has somewhat proven that, but I mean, it's easier to coach a Real Madrid side with Ronaldo and take nothing away from him, because Mourinho couldn't win the Champions League with Ronaldo. So I'm not trying to run him down. I'm just saying it's a bit easier than going into Solskjaer's position.
I don't think you can use Real Madrid or Barcelona as an example for anything.
Yeah,
I think maybe for Pep Guardiola you can use that Barcelona side because of how dominant he made them and for how consistently successful they were. I don't think Guardiola has had a challenge necessarily, like a big challenge. Like he hasn't had what Mourinho had with Port, where when it went and won the Champions League. He hasn't had what Ferguson had in terms of bringing a Manchester United back to thing. Although I think he is one of the greatest football managers of all time, he hasn't had a big challenge, and I think that's what makes it difficult for him. I mean, with Barcelona, success, stopped. Took a season or two off. Then Bayern Munich, easy. You know, you're going to win the league. And then Manchester City, easy once again. You're going to win the league. You know, and if there's something that you don't like, you've got access to all the money to fix that.
Yes.
Whereas I think Mourinho's early success with Porto in particular, and then the success with Chelsea wasn't that easy. You know, Chelsea was spending money before Jose got there. They had Ranieri, you know, who was coming from Juventus with all the success in the world, with a dazzling CV, and with the money to spend on top players. And it wasn't working straight away, which it doesn't. I think some of these owners need to realize that as well. It doesn't work straight away. But then Jose came in and he made that Chelsea side a force.
Yeah, no, definitely. So he came in. So I remember Ranieri, they played Arsenal 6 times. Was it 6 times? It was a ridiculous amount. It was 6 or maybe a bit more. Chelsea-Arsenal games. It was across the league, across the cup, across quite a few games. And I think they won one of those 6. And then after that, we all know what Mourinho's record was against Wenger.
Yeah.
He only lost against him at his, when was it? With Man United.
Yeah.
The last game that he played against Arsenal, as a United coach. That was the first time he lost to
Wenger.
So it just shows you how automatically a coach can just make a difference. Oh, I say coach, it's manager, because that's what he is. He's a manager. He's a man manager.
Yeah.
He was a fantastic man manager. There's a lot of great stories about how he would message players all the time, chat to them, make them feel welcome. And it's just, it makes a big difference.
I think in his early days, he got a lot of success with, he tried two things with every player. And I think it's become obvious now and players know what he's doing. But at first it would be the arm around the shoulder. And if he felt that arm around the shoulder wasn't going to work for you, he'd hammer you publicly, privately, in front of the team. He'd belittle you and make you feel so small because you weren't performing. Or even if you're playing well, but not to the level that he sees that you can do. He'd criticize you and everyone would open their eyes like, but he's playing well, what's Mourinho saying, whatever. And it would make the guy so determined, so aggressive and angry to prove him wrong that he would get even better. And I think that was part of his strategy of how he would manage players. And like now, since then, because of how player power has stepped into the game, I think even Ferguson would be having a bit of a tough time now. I think he managed well because he had that reputation for such a long time that players really respected him. But, he had to manage personalities, and I think Ferguson would struggle to manage personalities today because the players are so arrogant now and they've got so much power and their agents have so much power that you as the manager, you could be gone tomorrow because the player is so important to the club. Like a Paul Pogba is very important to Man United's income, Paul Pogba is more important to Man United than Ole Gunnar Solskjaer from a revenue standpoint. Pogba sells way more things, Adidas are more interested in Pogba than Solskjaer. So the player power has become ridiculous that and we saw it, Pogba's rift with Mourinho might be one of the factors that got him fired. So I think it's very difficult now to take that sort of attitude with players. So the man management side of the game is even more important today than it was.
Yeah, and it's different, right? If you throw a hairdryer at someone,
it's not going to work anymore.
You're probably going to get fired as the coach. It's just how it is. And I was thinking about this again. I must give credit where credit is due. My cousin that gave me a bit of feedback. He was saying to me, do you think it's the academies that are placing a lot of impetus on these players in their brains, going, oh, you're so important, coming through, getting pampered, and coming out on top going, well, I'm great. Yeah. You owe me, I don't owe you anything. Whereas you didn't, when we played soccer, we were probably like a bit shit scared of our coaches.
Yes.
We didn't want to piss them off. We knew that we had to stay in line. And okay, we're not talking about academy football, but still, we had a level of respect, even in social, which probably is a little bit harder because you're like, I'm just here just to play.
Yeah.
So is it that? Are players coming through with bigger heads?
I think it's a good point, and it's a very good question. It's a possibility, but I don't think so. Because I think those academies are run by former professionals who are trying to keep your head on the ground and trying to think. The thing is that they're fighting so many other factors now that they didn't have to face in the past. So Ryan Giggs didn't have YouTube around. So what would happen is that if it was filmed, if a youth game was filmed and he was 13 years old, he didn't become an overnight sensation when he dribbled past 6 players. And that's what's happening with players today, is that you can be 13 years old, you can be a Martin Odegaard who was 16 or 15 playing in the Norwegian leagues, and he went past everyone. He looked a different world of a player and signed for Real Madrid at the age of 17 or something. And since then, you're not hearing much about him. He's playing in La Liga now, and he's starting to get his name back a little bit. But I think that's one of the factors. I think the other factor is sponsors, because it's such a big money thing now today. Whereas I think football's always been sort of a big money sport, but not to the extent it is today, and especially not from a sponsor perspective. I think if Adidas gets hold of you young enough, they can make a lot of money because of social media. And I think like a Mason Greenwood now, the most important thing for managing a young player like him is to manage the mental side of the game and to make sure he keeps his feet on the ground and not his head in the sky. And keep that attitude together, because I think it's social media is one of the big things, like YouTube sensations, things like that, and the sponsors getting behind players when they're too young to have the head about them. When you're getting 16 years old and everyone's coming in there, an agent is coming in and telling you you're better than the club, you're bigger than this club, you going to play for Real Madrid or Barcelona, whatever. Meanwhile, there's no way of knowing at that age if you really are. You can see that you got the talent and the skill, but there's no way of knowing at that age if you are a superstar. But the agents get in your head like that because it means money for them.
Yeah.
If they can convince you to move clubs, and agents don't want you to stay in your club and be happy. You know, if Mino Raiola, Paul Pogba's agent, it's good news for him if Paul Pogba wants to leave the club because he gets a big signing bonus. You know, when he brokers the deal to Juventus and it's a £200 million signing or whatever it's going to cost, or 200 million euros, whatever it's going to cost to bring Paul Pogba to Juventus again, he gets a big chunk of that. So it's not in his best interest financially. I think that's the element for me, in my opinion. I don't think it's the fault of the academies and the coaches and whatever. I think they try as hard as they can. But it's all of these outside contributors, the sponsors, the agents, social media, things like that, that create this big head for a player. And then the owners of a football club aren't supporting their coaches and stuff like they should. You know, Roy Keane was an important player as the captain of Man United. He came out in an interview and criticized these fellow players. A couple of weeks later, he was at Celtic. Ferguson didn't stand for it, and the club didn't get involved. Whatever he wanted, went. And I think that now, if Jose Mourinho says, I want to get rid of Paul Pogba, he's too important for us for our revenue stream. You know, it's more of a business than it is about keeping a culture right at the club, things like that. And that's what it is. So I think it's these outside contributors and then clubs not being strict enough on players and allowing them to have player power. That, in my opinion, is what's going on.
Yeah, that's a solid point. It's a different world. I guess the one question that I don't think we can answer ourselves, and it would be great if we got someone in to have a chat about this, is how have the training sessions and that in education how have they adapted to this? You know, when I was in an academy, I don't even know, did I have a cell phone? I must have had a cell phone. A 3310 that had Snake on it. That was the greatest thing about the phone. So whatever we did, we didn't have put up pictures, get 1,000 comments.
I think you were in academy in 2006, hey? Or 2007?
No, before that. I was 2000.
Like with Supersport?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
2000.
Snake would have been...
Yeah. It was 2000, that's right, yeah.
Only when you went to Greece was there really like something closer to a smartphone.
Yeah, I guess even then there wasn't that much.
No.
Very, very
not
limited.
YouTube or anything like that. Like Mix It maybe.
Yes, there was Mix It and that was it. But I don't think I even used it that side. So, you know, your interaction with the outside world is limited. So how are academies dealing with that? Because, you know, you posting, and you can see it with that Tahit Chong and all those youngsters. They've been posting for a while now how great they are, and they get comments and stuff. It could work one of two ways, right? You can get a bloated ego.
Yes.
All right. And
which seems common.
Which is very common. Or they can really hammer you. And that's just not just the young players, you know. You could do something silly on the pitch, right? Or
it gets nasty.
Yeah, and it gets really nasty, and it gets to you. And you know,
racism and things, and you're 15 years old, how are you supposed to cope with that?
Yeah, even the 20-year or 30-year-old can't cope with it because it's not something they should cope with.
No.
And, you know, then you think to yourself, how is that impacting? So, for example, this bad boy, Roy Keane and that. Roy Keane, when he was a bad boy, went home. The only ones who would write about him, the press, and maybe the news, you could switch the TV off and relax.
And that was bad enough as it was at that time. I mean, I remember one of the big news stories is that one of the publications in the UK had tapped Wayne Rooney's phones. They had tapped his phones, which is disgusting. That like a newspaper, someone went into his house. They paid like some sort of spy, you know, like a sort of private investigator. And they paid him to go into his house and tap the phone so that they could listen to all his telephone conversations and try and get a story, which is disgusting in itself. But now they don't even need to do that.
No.
You know, and that was only for the very, very big players. Whereas now people are exposed to, their whole lives are almost exposed to everyone, and they're exposed to everyone's views. And also, it's one thing to be exposed to everyone's views. You know, if I had a press conference and I just let everyone come in and have a chat to the player and tell them exactly what they thought, like, fuck you, you were so bad in this game, you're so terrible, you're a horrible player, you should never play for Man United, whatever. That's one thing to hear that.
Yes.
But there's at least accountability there so that I can look at the guy who's saying this to me and then he can feel guilt if he's like not being honest or whatever. If he's just trying to hurt me, I can pick that up. Whereas with social media, people say the most outrageous things, but they've got this anonymity that comes along with social media, and they're in another country somewhere. You're never going to find them. They're never going to suffer any consequences because of it.
Yeah.
I can't speak today. It is horrible. By the way, anyone who's watching, listening, whatever, I am so sorry. It's horrible.
Yeah, don't slate him on social media, please.
I can get slated. You know what? Slate me all you want. I need the comments, the likes, and the views. Yeah. So, or even dislikes, whatever.
Yes.
Just comment.
Yes, whatever you want. But yeah, that's a very interesting point, because a lot of guys are trolling. They're not even there just to make. Okay, obviously the media trolls as well to get a reaction. But I want you to get upset with me. I want to be like, oh, well, you suck. And then you say something back, and I just carry on saying you suck so that you can get
The other thing is,
worse.
there's a lot of sad people in the world, and now they've got a voice, and they just want you to feel cuck like they do.
Yes,
you know, and they're
absolutely.
very jealous of you because they're not a top-class footballer, or maybe they're like me, who would have made it if it weren't for money.
Yeah.
You know? And now I'm just jealous that they out there making all those bucks, and they're pro football, and they're in a United shirt, and now I'm upset because of it. So I just want to make them feel cuck today.
Yeah,
you know, I want them to
absolutely.
be sad like I'm sad.
Yeah.
And I think that's how it works. And it's one of the things that's affecting players very negatively.
Absolutely.
But once again, it's one of the things that's giving players power, because that massive social media following is hugely valuable.
Yeah.
For an advertiser, it's so valuable.
And yeah, and absolutely, if you look at it, then the mentality comes into play. Are you the guy that's going to focus? And it's part of life, right? You either the guy who's going to focus on the one bad comment or the 10 good ones, or vice versa. You could be really positivistic. Positive. You got me. You got me with the disease. It's like Corona. You can be extremely positive and look at the one comment and go, yay. But so what I would like to find out from anyone who knows anyone who could answer this question: are people being trained on this? And there has to be. Like, honestly, if they're not being trained on how to react to social media, and I have gone on to local guys. Again, we'll be bringing up Daniel Cardoza a lot because he's from the South and we've played with him. And,
and you know him very well.
We know him. So Daniel, please, if you want to.
Listen, I would love to have Daniel in here for this podcast.
It would be fantastic, because we could ask him a lot of questions that we're bouncing off each other. That a lot of it is hearsay. A lot of it.
Look, I doubt he's allowed to right now with Corona scares and stuff like that.
Course,
under his contracts, I don't think he'd be able to join us. But listen, we'll phone you, whatever.
Once we got 1,000 comments, 2,000 comments.
There you go. You heard it, chat. Once we get 1,000
comments.
comments, okay, give us 1,000 comments.
And it would be great to hear from him. So I've been on his social media, and I've gone on his comments and that, and I see some guys, obviously, and it's in South Africa as well, obviously. Where they say, oh, well, you had a crap game, you missed that one header, you should have tackled that guy earlier. You got these guys, couch potato dudes that are saying stupid comments and that. I'd like to know.
That's not too bad. But
obviously, I'm censoring what I've seen.
Yeah.
And it's not just Daniel, it's all a bunch of guys, and it doesn't matter who you are. You're Ronaldo, you're going to get someone who's calling you a prick or whatever it is. So I'd like to know how these guys handle it. Are they being trained to handle it? Are there people they talk to? Is there like an account manager that manages their social media that they actually don't really see what's happening? Like, what is the process? Because mental health is very important in everything, and in sport, I guess it's even more important, because not only does your mental health govern how you act, it governs how people perceive you, which is very important for the younger crowds. Again, sportsmen shouldn't be role models, but they are. And sometimes they need to carry that responsibility.
I agree with you, and I think there's not a lot being done for social media training and stuff. And I think that there's two parties sort of responsible. Number one, it's the responsibility of the social networks. I think that anyone who's a celebrity should have a celebrity version of Instagram. Because, of course, you want them to be doing their own posts. You don't want them to have to hire someone to manage their social media account, because then we're disconnecting from those people, and it's just a money-generating machine. But I think they should be allowed to share their own stuff and share their day and share how they're living. I think that's what people are so attracted to. I think that they shouldn't have access to any of the comments. I don't think that they should be able to see a single comment from anyone, whether it be a friend or a colleague or whatever. I don't think they should even see the comments from their own network. unless they're allowed to select specific people. Maybe that's an option, and only people who are certified with like a blue tick, so like Wayne Rooney posts something and Robbie Keane, who's a friend of his and a fellow professional and a fellow celebrity who's got accountability, can go onto his thing and say, hey bud, happy birthday to your wife, very cool to see you guys, whatever. Maybe you can see that comment because there's at least accountability to that person. But you can't just have comments from every random person on the planet popping up there. It doesn't matter how many of them are positive, so many are negative. And we can see that suicide. There was the host of Love Island there in the UK. She took her own life recently, and a lot of that's down to social media abuse that they suffer. So I think it's very important that the social media networks get involved in this and start protecting especially young people. I can't imagine if it was around when I was 17 and I was famous. And then beyond that, the football clubs need to really have initiatives, or the FA community. It's easy to say that the football clubs should have initiatives when you're a Man United fan because you think they got all the resources in the world. They should be able to train the players. So what if it costs them £1 million? Who gives a shit? They've got loads of money. You look at clubs in lower divisions, they probably won't have the money to get behind an initiative to help their players. So perhaps it's the responsibility of the FA in the UK. It's our local SAFA, the South African Football Association. It would be their responsibility to protect their players, their members, like Daniel. So I think those would be the two people that really need to get some experts on board, help give them some training. But I think social media companies, it's so important. If anyone's verified, they shouldn't have access to all the comments. Even their community shouldn't be able to just access every comment. I think you need to establish at least something before your comments are visible. I think that your individual account should be held accountable for it.
Yeah.
Anyway, we are here without Andrea. We were talking about hosting our own podcast. Obviously, this one is still under my podcast series, the Marco Martins Revolution, which is a general lifestyle thing. So people who love football and football only might not necessarily want to subscribe to this, and this is something we want to do on a more permanent basis. What are we thinking for names?
Yeah, so the one name that it's Marco, it's your name.
Yes.
I don't want to take credit for, but I do like it. Finding football. So you'll elaborate on it more, but basically what we want to chat about is more than just these are the tactics, these are the teams, there's Nedved, blah blah blah. We want to be more active, maybe in the communities or whatever it is, to talk about real life stories, talk about what people like I went through, Marco's gone through, Andrea's gone through, and Daniel Cardoza. Please, dude, if you're listening to this, you have to come to the show. What he went through and how he made it and how much effort it took or didn't take, whatever the case is, so that we can discuss these things and talk more about the social media stuff. Like, is there something going? Let's investigate. Let's find out. Can we help out with the stuff like this? Is anyone willing to come forward with a solution?
Yeah.
I mean, that's the main aim of this podcast, I guess.
Yeah, so I think we want to create something that brings you, the listener and the viewer, something different. We aren't necessarily a panel of experts like you would have in Supersport, whatever, but we're also having a longer format conversation. So it is something that we're definitely going to touch on, like we did earlier in this episode, where we'd go into tactics, the teams we liked, history, and a few things. But we sort of want to bring a little bit more of the angle of the behind the scenes of football. I think especially academy level and people trying to get pro and whatever. And this is where we came up with this name of Finding Football, the Finding Football podcast, where we're sort of on this journey and this search, and we want to try and integrate as much professional insights into all of this. So we will actually go out and investigate, do a little bit of research of how things are and try to find whatever information we can, and then also bring in guests who can elaborate on all of this. I think that's a big part of what we want to do, and this is why we like the Finding Football podcast. Of course, this is a conversation we could be having off air, and it might be a bit boring, but the reason why we're bringing it up on air now is because we want you as the community to contribute to this conversation. We want you guys to go onto YouTube and comment underneath and tell us what you think. Find us on our individual social media pages. We will be creating a social media page just for this podcast so that you guys can follow that specifically and then give us your thoughts and your comments and stuff there. But preferably for now, give us a like on YouTube. if you are listening to this podcast via one of the podcast apps and audio only, give us a 5-star rating and just leave a comment there saying, I want to have a football podcast. I would love to listen to it. I would listen to it every week. I'm enjoying this. Something along those lines. And let us know, because we really want to bring you some great content. And give us a comment about what sort of content you would be looking for. You know, if you like this idea of us finding football and the behind the scenes and academy level football and things like that, and people's real stories versus the tactical side of the game and things like that. If that's something you're looking for, great, comment that as well. And we'll see if that's something we can bring you. Elias, I think we've already been criticized for going on for far too long in the past podcast. Thank you so much for joining us once again. If you have enjoyed the podcast, please leave us a rating, please leave us a review, and leave us some comments and stuff so that other people can find us in future as well.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having me. It's a lot of fun, and look forward to doing this more often.
Yeah, hopefully.
Yeah.
Okay. It's up to you guys as the community. Anyway, thank you so much for joining us once again. This episode was brought to you by Vodcast TV, Johannesburg's premier shared podcast studio platform. Visit vodcasttv.com/revolution now to get 15% off your first order. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.